Hey everybody, welcome back. Ironman, after a long summer of being gone, we actually start meeting together again tonight and then again tomorrow morning at 6:30. So if you're looking to join us in the future, it's Tuesday nights at 7, Wednesday mornings at 6:30 here at the Grove. I'm super excited about this new series that we're going through. It's called Soul Detox by an author named Craig Groeschel. I've actually had an opportunity to see him speak in California before. Great speaker, well-known author, podcaster, all of that kind of stuff. So I'm really looking forward to this. I'm going through another book of his right now called Winning the War of Your Mind, Winning the Battle of Your Mind, something like that. But anyway, I'm ready to dive into this. We're just going to do the introduction this week. We're going to save chapter 1 for next week because there was so much good in the introduction. I didn't want to skip through it. I didn't want to blow through that part just to get to chapter 1. There's some really good things in here, some great examples of how we have allowed our environment and our culture as Christians to just pollute us, pollute our minds, and to put toxins, spiritual toxins into our body. So I want to get started right away with a quote by D.L. Moody who says this. It's on the screen. God doesn't seek for golden vessels, nor does he ask for silver ones. He must have clean ones. And as we start thinking about that, God really, in order for him to use us to our maximum potential, we have to be clean. We have to be pure as we can be. And I know we're all going to sin and we're all going to do things we shouldn't do, but we need to strive to be different. We need to strive to be different from what's going on in the culture around us. So I'm convinced, well, I know this is like how it is for me, but we know that something doesn't quite feel right as we're trying to grow closer to God and through our relationship with Christ and trying to follow him the best we can, but we can't quite put our finger on what is it that makes it so hard when we say that our relationship with God is our number one priority. What are we doing to really, to really make that a fact? I can't quite put my finger on it. I don't know about you, but even though we believe in God and we want to please him, we find it hard to serve him passionately and consistently, at least as much as we would like to. We want to move forward spiritually, but we feel like we're running against the wind, like that old 70s song by Bob Seger, Running Against the Wind, or Against the Wind. And it's also like swimming against the tide. For any of you guys that are swimmers, that are out in the ocean, you know what that's like. You've got somewhere you want to go. You know that if you do certain things, you're going to be able to get there. But gosh, it's so hard. It's like, what is this force that's moving against us? So why do so many well-meaning Christians feel like we're taking one step forward and two steps back in our lives? What do we long more for with God in our lives, but yet we seem like we're moving further and further away the more and the harder that we try to get closer to him. So what is it that's holding us back from a relationship and the kind of relationship that we would like? Well, ultimately, we have this spiritual enemy that we call Satan. And he, as Peter describes him, he prowls around like a roaring lion, ready to steal, destroy, kill. Okay, this is how he's described. And he's described as the father of lies. And he is a master of distractions. Okay, he is going to distract us from what is most important in our lives. So the author here describes growing up in a home that was full of smokers. Anybody who grew up in the 70s, 60s, some of you older guys will remember that if your parents were smokers or people in the car that smoked when you were riding with them, or you went to someone's house and it seemed like everybody smoked back then. My family, fortunately, we didn't have smokers in our house, but I remember friends at school that all smelled like smoke. It just permeated when you went into someone's house, and when you got out of there, it was like, ooh, what a breath of fresh air, to get away from that. But once you're in there, you don't think about it. You kind of get acclimated to it, and that's what he's talking about here. So we have these forces that are stunting our growth that we don't even really know about because we're right in the middle of things. We don't really realize the impact that they have on our faith and on our lives. So I want to talk to you about a couple of things that are really stunting our spiritual growth. And the first one is that we are embracing harmful relationships. Number one is people embrace harmful relationships. That's really affecting how they can develop spiritually. The second one is we consume toxic media. Well, that's not just the news. When you think of media, that can be multimedia. That's internet. That's what are you flipping through on your phone? What are you scrolling through? What are you wasting time on? What are you looking at on the internet that you know you probably shouldn't be looking at? Not to mention all the negative news and all that stuff that we see on our local nightly news. And then the third thing is we live with addictive behaviors and habits that are usually harmful. There are good habits, there are bad habits, but we are oblivious sometimes to the long-term effects of these negative habits that we've adopted into our lives. And the other thing is we don't really want to take an honest look at ourselves and talk about or think about other things that we need to change in our lives. You know, how many of you are willing to go to your wife and say, hey, what do you think I really need to change that would make me a better man? You know, truthfully, you're not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. They may just offer that up to you, unsolicited, but, chances are you're probably not going to come to somebody and say, what can I do to be better? And that was one of my favorite things as a coach. We would have these players that were sitting on the bench, and you could tell they'd been coached up by their parents to come to coach and say, hey, what do I need to work on so that I can get more playing time? That was always kind of a funny line to me. It's like, yeah, well, you need to just be a lot better at what you're doing. You probably heard this example of the frog that gets boiled in the pot. And the story goes, if you haven't heard it, you put a frog in a pot of normal room temperature water, and you start slowly turning up the temperature on it, okay, on the stovetop. So it's gradually hotter and hotter and hotter, and he's not jumping out. He's very capable of jumping out, but it probably feels good to him. Nice warm bath. He's just getting warmer and warmer and warmer. He doesn't realize what's happening and that he's actually getting boiled to death. And then at some point, it's become so hot and so toxic to him that he can't even move at this point, and he's been destroyed. And in our culture, that's what's happening to us, is that the temperature is slowly going up on us. Things are changing at a slow pace. I was just talking to a friend of mine earlier about back in the 70s. He's a little younger than me, but maybe in the 80s for him, how they wouldn't allow certain words on network television. And now as you watch TV now, anything goes just about. I mean, maybe they'll do partial nudity instead of full nudity. Maybe they're not letting you do the F words, but they're letting everything else go. When we were kids, you didn't ever hear any swearing. Of course, we were watching Leave It to Beaver and Hogan's Heroes and Gilligan's Island and stuff like that. They didn't, or the Brady Bunch. You wouldn't ever hear, the Brady swearing. But even we would watch Dukes of Hazzard and Daisy Duke. Of course, we were all in love with Daisy Duke. But I read later that they actually the censors made her wear pantyhose underneath her short, trademark Daisy Duke shorts because it was just scandalous to show that much skin on your legs back in the early 80s, late 70s. So things have changed, and it's not just on TV. Things have changed morally around us, and we are slowly, just like that frog, we're getting boiled, and we don't even know it. We move away from God 1 degree at a time. All right, let me give you an example. What kind of movies are you watching? What do guys, we love good guys movies. Well, normally good guys movies have lots of killing, lots of shooting, lots of swearing. Those are things that we pride ourselves in as a good guys movie. John Wick, Mission Impossible, a lot of these kind of movies, a lot of fighting and shooting and killing and swearing. And, we look at that and say, that's just a guy's movie. Well, really? Is that something that we should be putting into our mind? I was watching a movie the other night, and I enjoyed it. It was kind of like a remake of like an old Steven Seagal type movie. I don't even want to say the name of it because I don't want to promote it necessarily because of all the swearing that was in it. And I was like halfway through the movie, and I'll admit I was enjoying it, but it did have a lot of swearing in it. And then my son came up the stairs, and he stopped, and he kind of leaned around the corner of the loft, and he said, "Hey, Dad, what are you watching?" And I paused it because I didn't want him hearing those words. So now it's okay for me to hear those words because I'm a grown man, but I don't want my 13-year-old impressionable son hearing those words and now I'm thinking, okay, here I am. I'm just about to teach on this like in a couple of days, and I'm doing the very thing that I'm saying we probably ought to start making changes to of what we're doing. I'm right there with you guys, okay? I'm not perfect on this, but there are times when I'll be watching something and the Holy Spirit just convicts me, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I was watching something on Hulu the other day, and I'm part of the way through like the first episode, I'm going, no, this isn't good. This isn't good for my soul. You ever watched a movie like where there's all kinds of shooting and killing and stuff, and you just feel like you need a hot shower afterwards? It's like, oh, that was so bad. Why did I just spend 2 hours watching that? You know, and I think that's God talking to you, saying, you know what? Maybe it's time to draw that line and decide what's best to go into your mind. I'm not necessarily trying to be prudish and say we need to draw a line in the sand on everything. I'm not going to let my kids watch anything. I'm going to take away their cell phone and those kind of things. I think we have to be careful not to be in the world, but be of the world, you know, as Paul talks about. We can't just immerse ourselves into everyday aspect of what's going on in the world and not expect to be affected in some way. You know, so we do have to pull away sometimes. We do have to draw the line and say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go to that. I'm not going to watch that. And we don't necessarily have to be judgmental when we're talking to people about that. We just say, you know what, for my own soul, I'm not going to do that. Trust me, the movie producers are not worried about your soul at all. Same with the record producers. You know, you're not going to go on iTunes and find people that care about how you're doing with your faith or whatever. Now, there are obviously Christian music on there, and there are good things, and there's good movies out there to watch too. I'm not condemning all of that. I'm just saying, ultimately, it's your responsibility to control what's going on or what's going into your mind. And when you're allowing toxic movies, toxic words, toxic lyrics, toxic thoughts and images to go into your mind, what do you expect is going to happen with your relationship with Jesus? I've had this explained to me before like this. Would you watch that movie if Jesus were sitting right next to you? If Jesus was sitting on the couch next to you, you turn on the TV, would you turn it to that show? Well, you know, guess what? Jesus is sitting right there next to you. He might not be there physically, but he actually is right there. He's in you. He's in your mind and your soul. It's the Holy Spirit. So we need to be careful of that, and we need to make sure that we're only putting the good stuff into our minds. Is it that dangerous to our souls? Well, what we think is laughable and entertaining and funny and watching guys get shot different ways and all those kind of things, maybe it's possible that God actually finds that kind of stuff heartbreaking. You know, maybe that's not quite, you know, what he has in mind for us. He knows that that's not what's best for us. Just like I turned off the TV on my son, I knew it wasn't best for him. God knows what's best for us, and he's probably saying, you know, some of that stuff you're watching, you shouldn't be. Think about this. Everything that we allow into our hearts and our minds and our lives, anything that we spend money on or that we invest time in, it has an impact on how we grow or how we don't grow spiritually. So we're wondering why we only take one step forward and two steps back. Maybe a lot of it has to do with the toxins that we're allowing into our life. I want to read this verse to you. It's going to show up on the screen. Proverbs 25:26 says, like a muddied spring or a polluted well are the righteous who give way to the wicked. So let me ask you this. How muddy is your water right now? How muddy is your spring? How do you get to clean water? Well, you get to clean water by going deeper. You want to get clean water? You want to get a cleansed soul? Go deeper in your relationship with God. So what is it that's muddy in your water? What is it that's stirring things up in your soul? Okay, we want clean water. You ever swam in a dirty river, the Mississippi River? We had some rivers in Mississippi when I lived there. We used to swim in. They were nasty, brown, gross. I've swam in the Sierra Nevadas up in the mountain water, crystal clear, perfect, ice cold, but you know, you want to swim in it because you can see the bottom. It's awesome. Okay, which one do you choose? Which one do you want? Do you want muddied water? You want crystal clear water in your soul? So we all think about things that we would like to do and we'd like to say to people that we never do. Okay, we all have those ongoing dialogues in our head, monologues, what we'd like to say to our boss, how we'd like to tell him off. Not me personally, but you know, they're the driver who cuts us off. Man, if I catch up with that guy, and we all have these things that we think in our heads, or ooh, that girl looks pretty good. You know, I'm sure, you know, if she would have me, you know, and I mean, then you start thinking about what would it be like to be with her and these kind of things. And you never act on it, okay? Not that I'm saying you should, but the point is that all of these negative thoughts, all these unhealthy thoughts are actually poisoning your soul. They're pouring lies into your spiritual water supply, so to speak. Maybe it's the people that you hang out with regularly that are poisoning your water, that are muddying your water. You know they're not full on into God. You know that their relationship with God's not important. They may not have any kind of relationship with God at all. But you continue to hang out with them. You don't want to seem like a religious freak or a Jesus freak or a fuddy-duddy or whatever. And you continue to hang out with these people. Okay, you're not making a difference in their lives because you're just going along with it. You're not being a missionary. You're not trying to convert them. You're just running with the crowd. Okay, they don't see you as anybody different from what they are. Okay, maybe it's time to make some changes in that. You know, you might believe one way, but you're acting a totally different way. Maybe you've resigned yourself to certain struggles that you have in your life. Maybe you're an angry person. Maybe you have fits of rage. Maybe you're a very pessimistic person. Maybe you're a very lustful person with a wandering eye. And you just say, well, you know what? I've tried. I can't stop. That's just who I am. And I want to tell you that, you don't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be like that. You can make those kind of changes in your life. God wants you better than that. And you can be better than that. So deep down, and I know there's a truer and a deeper way to live, isn't there? There's a purer way to love. You know that there's a truer way to live. You know that there is a larger impact that you can make on the world than what you're actually making. And we're not making that impact because we don't think we're good enough. We don't think, I'm not a good enough Christian to go out and do those kind of things. Well, why aren't you? What's holding you back? Well, it's these poisonous influences that are muddying your water. Okay, how do we get rid of those things? Well, we start identifying the things that we're going to allow into our minds and into our hearts. So it's time to open your eyes. It's time to open your heart to the cleansing power of God's truth. Well, how do we get to that point? How do we get to the point where we know what God's cleansing power is? What does that even mean? Okay, well, what are you struggling with? What do you need to get rid of in your life? Let God come in and change that. Ask for forgiveness. Ask Him to help you do things differently. Ask for repentance that you don't want to go back and do it again. You remember David in the Old Testament, right? Everybody knows King David. Well, David was far from perfect, but yet we look at him as being like, King David. But he committed adultery. He committed murder. He had sins of lust. He had sins of entitlement. There was deception in his heart that led to him killing Bathsheba's husband on the battlefront. But he knew deep inside, he was convicted, just like many of you are of your sins. He knew that things had to be restored, and he knew the only way to experience a joyful, fulfilling life was to get this type of cleansing that he needed before God. I want to read this to you from Psalms. We're going to jump from Psalm 51, 2, 7, 10, and 12. It's on the screen. It says this: wash away all my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. Cleanse me with hyssop and I will be clean. Wash me and I will be whiter than snow. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. This is what David prayed. He's wash away all my iniquity. Okay, God, we have to invite God to come in and say, God, my life is stained and it's not where I want it to be right now. Okay, I've done a lot of bad things in my life. My spring is far from crystal clear, as muddy as can be. But I know that you can come in and flush it, and you can replace it with clean water. And God, that's what we want you to do. You ever had that? Without revealing too much of my past, you ever had that experience when you've been in a bar? Now, this was back a long time ago. I'm going way back to the late 80s. Okay. When I was in college, full discretion or full confession here, I had a fake ID when I was in college. Used to go into the bars with my older buddies who were in my dorm, and we would hang out in there and dance and drink and all that kind of stuff. But in East Tennessee in those days, and even wherever, bars and restaurants were full of smokers. So you're in there with all of this smoke, and you didn't really even notice it. Now, I noticed it at first when I first started going as a freshman in college. because I didn't grow up with that. I didn't grow up going to bars or having smoke in my house or anything. When I got to college, I did a little bit of that. And I remember coming outside of those bars, and it would be cold. It was the mountains of Tennessee, the Smoky Mountains. We would come outside, and just that, oh, I could breathe again. You know, I don't have to live in that. And I feel like that's what this is like. You know, we're coming out now. That's what this book is about. We're coming out of that smoke-filled room. We're coming out of that smoke-filled bar, and we're breathing this fresh air, this fresh spiritual air. So I want to invite you to detox your soul. That's what this is all about. We're going to go into that more next week in chapter 1. I hope you can join us again next week. See you later, everybody.